Good morning and welcome. I'm Marion Dry, Chair of Class Act HR 73. It's my honor to welcome you to this symposium, Climate Change, Public-Private Partnerships, and Social Equity, Lessons from Bangladesh, which is jointly sponsored by our host, the Weatherhead Center for International Affairs, and the Salata Institute and Class Act HR 73.
Now, Marion has given me a very difficult task here, which is to say a few words about Benazir Bhutto. The difficult part for me is few words. She was an extraordinary person, not only for a belief in democracy, which wasn't just a stated belief. When she became prime minister in December of 1988, the first thing she did was to free all political prisoners, to end censorship in the country, to end the repression of minorities, to stop the cruel punishments of public executions and floggings. But to me, her greatest quality was something that I think is terribly rare in public life. And certainly, if we look at the behavior of one of our political parties in this country, totally absent, and that is courage. She was a person with great political courage and physical courage.
When we think about climate change, we have to think about the root causes, and the root cause of this is largely how we use energy. Okay? This is a flow map of different sources of energy mapped onto how they are used in the United States. And one of the things that you'll see, this is from 2022, while yes, it is the case that we have things like solar and wind and whatnot, they're tiny in comparison. Another observation is that we waste most of that energy. This is basically a plot of just the sort of net benefits to GDP of avoiding the catastrophic harms of climate change, right? And so if you're out there in the private sector thinking about how you're going to be making 20 years from now, you're not going to be making that great of a return on your investment if the world is going to hell in a handbasket. And it will, unless we do something about this. And so this is basically plotting the sort of mitigation costs that we're going to have to pay. And they are large. I just told you about some of the challenges that there are going to be relative to the benefits that we get, including public health, including a more robust and stable infrastructure. So we've got a lot to do, and today is an opportunity to do it.
So at that point in time, the World Bank came with another project. They wanted to do a rollout of solar home systems, the rural areas of the country. So $500 loan against $80 million loan that I just dealt with, we are not happy about it. I said, this is not our cup of tea. I mean, like, how can we manage many $500 loan like throughout the country? We are supposed to be a large financier. But we took it reluctantly and we started seeing the potential. At that point in time, about 70% of the country was outside the grid area. So there was huge potential in reaching out. 50,000 households was our target over a 5-year period. And we were supposed to develop a business model. So it was not just a grant-driven program. We needed to bring in the private sector. We needed to bring in the household, develop a business model which will eventually become a sustainable business model after the 50,000 deployment in the country. We achieved the 50,000 solar home system target covering 50,000 families in just 3 years, and saw the immense possibility of reaching out 15 million households in the country. So the program went on, a good business model was established, and we ended up reaching almost 5 million families under this single program alone, making it the single largest off-grid electrification program in the world.
So I think a lot about effects of climate change on migration, for which Bangladesh is really a very relevant example. Nazmul mentioned it's a very highly densely populated country, about a third of which is directly exposed to coastal flooding that is expected to increase with state of a rise. So we are already seeing population movements for a variety of reasons in the case of Bangladesh. And a lot of what my work and a lot of people's work is trying to do is to try and understand how increased effects of climate change, including through coastal flooding, but not only, might change those migration patterns, but that would not just happen because of climate change. Those migration patterns happen for a variety of reasons.
Climate change and adaptation and mitigation are the two kind of leverages that we use. And a lot of the population in the planet that are going to be facing the brunt of climate change, the most difficult situations, are those that live in a situation of high vulnerability and very low resilience. You can do an implementation of a climate change transition project with the proper funding, Green Climate Fund and all these things, in a city like Medellin, Colombia, middle income, OCDE levels, et cetera, et cetera. It's not the same to do it in a place where the fragility and the risk for investment makes it very difficult for the private sector to get in. So you need the public-private partnership. You need the public side to pave the road, to take the hit, so that the financials on the private can come and do their magic. We are past the moment in which we can have remedial action to bring change. We actually have to engage in a necessary course of action to ensure survival. And that implies a major change in the speed. The other element that when I talk about the interface of climate change, peace, and security, the kind of funding that is presented by my colleagues here is essential, because we do live in a system in which funding, risk, quantification is what makes resources move from point A to point B. Funding in fragile contexts is extremely difficult to come by.
And what I'm saying is, in many cases, whether for an energy transition or whether for adapting to climate change impacts, we're reaching a stage where the scale of the efforts that have to be made are so large that we're not going to be able to do little things that are going to adjust on the margin. We're going to have to, do bigger things. And for that, we need to have projects that are kind of playing out along our values. Otherwise, people are not going to be on board.
The role of public-private partnerships, it's a great concept to have the public and private supporting each other, but you need to have the rules of the game established so that the two of them can thrive together. This means creation of an enabling environment of policy and regulation which will last long enough for the goals to be achieved.
In Australia, homeowners can probably get to zero emissions, zero electricity bill with one set of renovations to their home. Home solar system, heat pumps, maybe some added insulation, and they turn their home into an energy plant that makes money for them and doesn't cost anything. That's probably about 80% of homes in Australia. It doesn't need new technology. It doesn't need new policy. It doesn't need new regulation. It's cash flow positive immediately for these homeowners at their current mortgage rate. The problem is a behavioral change problem in that it's a really difficult thing to contemplate. It's, from a cognitive point of view, it's a really big, complex decision about what kind of system for your home, all the other things that you can do, who are the service providers, how do you finance it, can you predict how it will pay off in terms of reduced electricity costs. And so when we do surveys and ask people about this behavioral change that they've contemplated but haven't taken yet, the overwhelming answer is, I know I should probably do it, but I just keep putting it off.
There were massive floods in Pakistan in 2022. About an area the size of England was underwater. That's massive, right, in terms of land mass. The estimated damage was about $30 billion. That's what it would take to recover. Okay. At the moment, as we speak, there is some place called Gwadar, which is a major now wanting to be a port city. It's a big part of like the Belt and Road Initiative. Talk about geopolitics. That is under flooding. There's been 30 hours of non-stop rain, and people's lives are completely destroyed. They are fishermen, so their boats have been wrecked, and this has livelihood impacts. There's no understanding of how they will recover and how they will cope. As we sit here in Texas, the largest wildfire in the state's history, as well as Oklahoma, 1.2 million acres is burning. There is talk about air quality and impacts on life expectancy and health. It's not just indoor air quality is bad. We have estimates that all of the gains from air quality improvements will be lost and squandered because we will have the wildfires, say, as burned last year in Canada.
Things are, as the old baseball phrase went, they're getting late early. We now have some good evidence that whatever we call climate disruption is accelerating. It is not linear. It is logarithmic. There are tipping points we cannot identify, and we are not even sure whether we have passed some or not. Whether it's sea level rise, or whether it's global mean surface sea temperature, or Antarctic ice, or Greenland ice cap melt, or West Antarctic ice sheet movement, every single one of the data points on all of those have moved in ways recently that scientists characterize with words such as worrisome, inexplicable, scary, and a word that scientists rarely use but have used recently, alarming.
The intergenerational equity is an element, is a tool that we are not using enough. I mean, I have 4 kids, okay? And I feel really emotional about the fact that their future is not going to be the same as mine. That is something that I think everybody in the political spectrum will share with me, because we all care about our children. That's the way we have to mobilize the world.
So if we think about a dollar in 30 years, or 50 years, or 70 years, at 2% or 4%, $100 that I'm going to get in 70 years is worth $6. That's all. Right? That's just kind of normal discounting. 4%, by the way, is the current risk-free rate. 2% is the current real return. Right? And anything that goes out 100 years is pretty much worthless. And that is the economic logic we use for everything. But the problem is, that means that your grandkids' are worth nothing. And so ethicists have worked with economists to try to figure out something called what a social discount rate is. Because to the extent that you use any discount rate that's even mildly material, you're going to fundamentally say that ethically future generations don't count. And so therefore, and I'm a finance professor. I taught for 30 years. I never heard of this concept. Right? But this is how you have to think about these things, because fundamentally, in order to do the analysis that we need to do, we have to rewire our brains and think about, no, it's not about market discount rates. We are fundamentally valuing life. Because if you think about it, the logic behind time value of money is that dollar tomorrow is worth a lot less than today, because I can take $1 today, put it in some investment, and I'll earn more. But you can't do that with life. But we're going to use the same logic for life. So we have to fundamentally alter how we think on something so fundamental as just the time value of money, which is one of those things that everybody agrees. Of course, that's something we have to understand. So if we put all this together, we have all these levers. And I think if we use all of them, we actually stand a pretty good chance. So where does that leave us? I've ticked off the exam for Donella Meadows, all right? But on the other hand, I think we're missing 2 things. I'll just close with those 2 things. The 2 necessary final things beyond all that. The first one is hope. I like this quote from Cory Booker. It's in his book, United. And I think he says it in a nice way. Hope confronts. It does not ignore pain, agony, or injustice. It's not a saccharine optimism that refuses to see, face, or grapple with the wretchedness of reality. You can't have hope without despair, because hope is a response. Hope is the active conviction that despair will never have the last word. We need hope, not optimism. We are not on a path to optimism, but we need hope. And the second thing we need, and this, I was at a meeting yesterday. We were talking about all the things we're doing around the university on climate. And someone said we need to do stuff on policy, and we need to do stuff on science, and we need to do stuff on kind of public health. And I said, we're missing something in this conversation, because the thing that we don't have is leadership. Right? We've talked about all the technical stuff, but what we've lost is the conversation about leadership. Now, there's lots of leadership quotes, but this one I thought in the systems space sits pretty well. This is the former, I think, CEO of Herman Miller, the furniture company. First responsibility of a leader is to define reality. The last is to say thank you, and in between, the leader is a servant. Now, you might think that doesn't work in a corporation setting, but in a setting where we have to get a lot of other people and work together, this is maybe not a bad way. So putting this all together, I think that there is a lot of work to be done. But on the other hand, we have a lot of levers. And if we use those levers across the board, I think we can make reasonably good progress.